So what they want is a civil war in these various countries, which will allow them to impose their fascist tyranny to stop the war, stop the civil war. And the more extreme stories appear in the newspapers and online about Muslim migrants and what they do, some of them do, the better for the cult, because it makes the population furious and angry and frustrated about what they see as their culture being overridden and taken over. But what you are looking at, and if you do any research, you can uncover this. There are elements coming out of Israel, your Mossads and etc., that are behind this massive influx of migrants from the Middle East and elsewhere too into Europe. And you listen to these stunningly extremist rabbis who are saying that Edom must be destroyed, and Edom is the West. It is Europe. It is the United States and Canada, etc. And that Islam is their means to do it. And crucially, what they say must happen before the Messiah can come, then you start to get a kind of idea of how this fits together. I'm not Nostradamus. What I've done is work to uncover the plan, which they don't want us to know, and I've communicated that to anyone that wants to listen. Now, if the plan is not dealt with, if there's not an intervention to stop the plan happening, then the plan becomes the future.
Welcome everyone to Hot Topic Society Critical Conversations without censorship. Before you're going to check out this video, be sure to give a share, comment. Should make sure that this gives a boost to the algorithm. Now, my listeners know that normally my podcast is in Dutch and I'm talking in English. So why am I talking in English? Because I got the legend, the person everybody on my podcast has been asking for, Mr. David Icke. If you want to check out his books, you can check some of the background. He's building like a library of his own. So I'm super honored that I finally have the ability to talk to you, David. I thought that it might be like a good occasion because we're like in 2025. So it's like in the middle between the whole COVID-19 84 in 2020. And you have agenda like 2030. That's also like less than 5 years. So my first question is looking back at COVID and what happened there, and we're now in like 2025. What were they able to achieve since 2020 that they wanted? And what is something that they weren't able to achieve right now when you look at this and we're like in the middle between 2020 and 2030?
All of that depends on human perception and reaction and human understanding of what the game is. Because for a very long time, I've been at this now full time since 1990. And in those early years of the 1990s and even across the millennium, it was difficult for large numbers of people to see the validity of what I said in terms of this unfolding plan to create a global dystopia. Because it wasn't, especially in the 1990s, so much in their face. It's like they were looking at it and they were experiencing it, but not in a way where it made itself clear. Once COVID hit, you had as I said at the time, you had this global cult, which is network of global secret societies with an interlocking leadership, walking into the room and putting itself on public display for anyone who was even vaguely paying attention. And since then, it's become more and more obvious to more and more people what's happening. But it's still not being grasped by the vast majority. And the whole foundation of the plan is to keep it as much as you can from the target population so they don't see where it's going. And they have a problem with that because you can manipulate under the surface, under the radar, for a long time, putting things into place just below the surface. But there comes a point when, and we're in it now, where if you're going to transform society in the way that you've always planned to, then there comes a point where you have to break the surface where people can see it. And as we're moving closer and closer to 2030 and beyond, more and more pillars of this plan are appearing. And if anyone reads my books from way back, they'll see what is happening now described in terms of what the plan was. And people say to me, how did you predict what was going to happen? I'm not Nostradamus. What I've done is work to uncover the plan, which they don't want us to know, and I've communicated that to anyone that wants to listen. Now, if the plan is not dealt with, if there's not an intervention to stop the plan happening, then the plan becomes the future. In other words, by predicting the plan, if nothing intervenes to stop it, you are essentially predicting the future. And I've been far too accurate in that than I ever wanted to be. Because the whole point of what I've been doing this past, nearly 36 years now, is to alert people, hopefully enough people, to intervene. And unfortunately, the acquiescence to the COVID fake vaccine, which was what COVID was all about, getting that shite inside us, not me, thank goodness, and not a lot of other people, but the vast majority, it's had not just a physical effect, that's clear, but a psychological effect on many people as well, which has made it more and more difficult for people to see through the smoke screens, if you like, to what is really happening and to manifest the desire to do something about it. So I've had this phrase I've used for a long time now, know the outcome and you'll see the journey, because if you don't know what the outcome is planned to be, then everything that happens every day it's a random event, bewildering event often. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? What's the point of doing this or that?
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy theorist, it's a coincidence theorist.
Yeah, a coincidence theory, exactly. But what happens when you know what the outcome is planned to be is it transforms immediately those events and happenings from random to, stepping stones to the outcome. And if you therefore look at what the plan is, there are many elements to it, the vast majority of them psychological, actually, because you control perception, you control behavior. The foundation of it is to fuse humans with artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. Now, I've been calling out since way back Elon Musk as a fraud in many ways and a liar in many ways, endless ways, but a fraud in the area I'm talking about now, in the sense that he set himself up as an AI skeptic, as, I'm on your side. But look at him now, as he was always going to do. The Twitter X platform is Page, which has the algorithms on full blast. Thus, he gets millions or tens of millions of views for every post, no matter how inane. his page is now about 90% selling AI to people openly, more and more aggressively and more obviously, because they're all moving. And when you talk about Elon Musk, you can't talk about him without talking about Peter Thiel at Palantir, the man who's funded the political career of J.D. Vance, and Mark Andreessen, and David Sachs, who is a friend of all these people, an associate of all these people, and was named by Trump when he came to power for the second time in January as his AI czar, David Sachs, and crypto czar. And they are driving this AI agenda. Within 2 days of getting back into the White House, Trump hosted a Oval Office press conference with people like Larry Ellison of Oracle and Sam Altman of ChatGPT and OpenAI to announce an up to $500 billion AI massive expansion called Stargate. There have been White House press releases since then pointing out the importance that the Trump administration, i.e., the oligarchs of Silicon Valley, the AI oligarchs, how they, or the Trump administration officially, sees AI as absolutely numero uno and essential to what it's trying to achieve. And you've got people like Ray Kurzweil at Google, the futurist, the Google executive, who long ago got one of his books back here, The Singularity is Near, which lays out, as he has in interviews, the fact that by 2030, he gives that name, that date, there will be a fusion of humans and AI. And in his words, once that connection is made, AI will do more and more of human thinking until human thinking is negligible, which of course it means deleted. So we are looking while all these diversions go on, because if that's the goal, you want people looking over here. What's Trump saying today? Trump or Harris? Trump or Biden? What's he said? What's Trump saying about Obama? What's Obama saying about Trump? All this diversion, while boom, the jackboots move on towards an AI human being. Let me point out the game that's going on. There's the hard sell of AI and the human fusion, and that's coming from your Bill Gateses, from your Klaus Schwab's when he was head of the World Economic Forum, and people like Kurzweil, but others too. Musk, to an extent, he's moving into that camp now. But before that, he was the soft seller of AI. And what I mean by that is he, as I mentioned already, he placed himself as an AI skeptic. In other words, I'm on your side. I'm very worried about this. Could be the end of humanity. It was one of his phrases. But from the moment he said that, he went on pushing AI, which is like contradictory to say the least. And he then, this was crucial, he was then allowed to buy Twitter X. And I say allowed because I know from my personal experience, and so many others do, that the deep state, as they call it, and every country has one, and they're all connected, the deep state had control of Twitter. It was throwing people off, me included, for having the wrong opinion, not least about COVID. And so it had everything that it wanted. It had control of what was seen on Twitter. So why, the question should be asked, did the deep state then allow Elon Musk to buy Twitter, who was claiming, wrongly, but claiming to be a free speech absolutist?
Yeah, but I also don't understand is like, you can't become the richest man in the world without the support of the financial elite and the globalists. Like, people seem to want to believe in fairy tales. You can get to become so high, so much on top, so much power, and being like the Batman who goes against all the other financial big players. That is just delusional.
Exactly. And that's a massive red flag and flashing red lights, because if they wanted to bring Musk down and if they wanted to bring Trump down, they could do it overnight. The current rate, Elon Musk, for example, is getting $8 million a day from the government of the United States for his various companies, $8 million a day in subsidies. Now, he was allowed to buy Twitter, and he puts out these Twitter files after he bought it. By the way, he didn't buy it alone. He bought it with a load of people who were the usual suspects, but tried very hard to keep that knowledge secret. Unfortunately, through a court case, it came out. It's now owned by appropriately, given what I've just said, it's now owned by his XAI company. That's who owns now Twitter, because a Twitter X is a vehicle to sell XAI. Anyway, he put out these documents, emails, whatever, from the Twitter before, and they became known as the Twitter files. He only put out a few. And they confirmed that the deep state controlled Twitter before him. So again, why would the deep state, having got what it wants, hand it away? They didn't. And it was very clear to me, having tracked Musk for years before he bought Twitter X, that there was a scam going on in allowing him to buy it. The question was only the detail of what the scam was, and that became clear very quickly. Because what has happened since COVID, when the alternative media came into its own and started to be a focus of a lot more people in terms of where they got the information from, they were getting a bit out of hand, the genuine alternative media. And so they brought in, and I watched it happen, a load of people from the mainstream, and they became the stars of the alternative media, who were given massive algorithmic support and funding support, and have basically focused attention on them in terms of the uncovering of the, quote, conspiracy. And what they've done is regressed the alternative media from the understanding, which was widespread and still is in the genuine alternative media, that we live in one-party states. It's been regressed into, no, the deep state is not working through all the parties. It's the Democrats in the American example, which is nonsensical. The deep state works through all these different parties to target different areas of society. And that's a point I'll come to now, because once Musk bought Twitter X, suddenly the alternative media, that mainstream part of it and others, was suddenly their guard came down. Before he bought Twitter X, there were a significant number of people in the alternative media who were saying, hey, this guy Musk, he's a transhumanist. He wants us all connected to AI. Outrageous. But once he bought Twitter X, so much of that, the vast majority of that, just faded away, because he's one of us now. And it was a scam. And when he started funding Trump into power, before they're falling out, and that falling out seems to be diluting by the day.
The thing that I find also interesting about this specific topic, I think I heard Catherine Austin Fitz talk about it, and I think it's an interesting theory. Musk sponsored Trump, and why did he get Doge? They say, oh, to make the government more efficient. Her theory is, and it's also interesting with AI, no, he wanted to get access to the governmental data.
That's exactly, that's my take as well. And again, everything connects if you talk long enough. So I mentioned earlier a guy called Peter Thiel at Palantir, for those who haven't come across it, and I do strongly recommend you research it, is a company that was seed funded by the CIA, headed by Peter Thiel, another guy called Alex Karp, and there's other guys involved as well. And what they do, Palantir, is they provide surveillance and data processing technology for intelligence agencies, not just American, and for the military. And they are fundamental and central to what you're talking about here, which is the deletion of checks and balances and firewalls between different organizations, even parts of government, where information about all of us is held in compartmentalized areas. So there's no one place where you can go and then get everything, or at least in theory, about someone. But what Trump has done is give Palantir the contract to do exactly that. So they're looking for data. Everything is data. Data is control. And what Musk's Doge was doing was using AI actually to trawl the data of the American population for this whole massive data structure, this data network that they're building. And so when Musk was funding Trump to power with his $250 million, it was par for the course. It was no surprise to me because it was exactly what you would expect. And since he's come to power, like I say, Trump, it's AI this and AI that, and the whole focus has been AI in the administration, if not so much publicly, in the sense of the scale of what's actually going on behind the scenes. And now we have Elon Musk, who the big point where the dynamic changed from I'm an AI skeptic to what he's become, a total AI sales pitcher, was when he said that AI was inevitable, when he said AI fusion with humans was inevitable. Because when you're trying to stop something, you try to stop it. But when you think that what you're trying to stop is inevitable, the dynamic changes dramatically because now you're not trying to stop it because you don't think you can. Now you're trying to mitigate the effect as best you can. And basically what Musk was saying is, look, it's inevitable, but trust me because I'm a skeptic like you. And what you've had is the hard sell of your Gateses and your Kurzweils, etc. That's been given overwhelmingly to the left in politics, which is basically has gone with it. And then the big problem was the right, what's become known in America as the MAGA. They're very skeptical, or were very skeptical, about this AI control system, which is not just about a fusion with humans, it's AI controlling everything. Your money, where you can go and where you can't go, everything. And so the target in this pre-2030 period was that skeptical group that didn't want the AI control system. And what's happened, and it's all psychological, it's all perceptual manipulation, is that they've done what they always do. They target a group, a mentality, and they tell it what it wants to hear. So they look at what it's concerned about. Okay, I'm concerned about immigration. I'm concerned about this nonsense of climate change and net zero. I'm concerned about this, that, the other. And what you then do is you put someone up like Trump, who is an ideological neutral zone. The only thing he thinks about is him and how he looks. Just talk to anyone who knows him and they'll tell you exactly the same story. He's a front man. And what he has been doing, because he's very good at manipulating his base, is telling them what they want to hear. And while he's doing that and focusing their attention, the AI agenda has rushed forward. And so he's, for instance, if you're concerned about immigration, then what you do is you say, yeah, but if we're going to stop this illegal immigration, we've got to have digital IDs. That'll stop it. Then we'll know who people are. But hold on. The hard sell of Gates and Co. is for digital IDs. And in Britain, the cult guy who, every time he opens his mouth, the cult is speaking, Tony Blair, the former prime minister, he's pushing digital IDs. Anyone who's of the cult is pushing digital IDs. But what you have in America is they're trying to get this skeptical group on board with it. And for instance, I'll give you a wonderful example of that we're seeing in the European Union, and we're seeing it more and more in Britain too, the movement towards central bank digital currencies. Now, they want a digital currency. I've been saying this since 1992-3 in a book called The Robots' Rebellion. They want an end of cash, and they want digital currencies. Digital currencies that are programmable. So you can program them so you can only buy what they're programmed for you to buy. Things they don't want you to buy, the programming won't allow them to buy, even if it's your money in theory. Programmable also means they can program this currency so it can only be spent in a particular area. And if you go outside that area, then you've got no money because it won't work. And in America, the MAGA has been vehemently opposed to central bank digital currencies. And people talk about Russia and Putin as being different. No, he's not. That we have the digital ruble. The same AI digital control system is unfolding in Russia as it is everywhere else. So you have this pushback on central bank digital currencies in the United States. So what Trump has done, tell them what they want to hear. He put out an executive order, basically a dictatorship diktat, saying America will never have a central bank digital currency. Whoa, we're winning. And then he introduces stable coins and promotes stable coins. Stable coins are a digital currency, a private digital currency that is programmable. So he's said we're not having this and then brings it in with the other hand. This is what's happening right across the board. And unfortunately, so many people are buying it, not realizing that they're actually supporting what they would have once have opposed. So now we have troops on the streets in Los Angeles. We have troops on the streets in Washington, D.C. We have the dictator Trump saying he's going to introduce troops on the streets in other cities. He wants to unseat Maduro in Venezuela because of all the oil they have. Never mind the excuses he gives. They always do that. It's because of all the oil there. And we're seeing, ironically, everything that I've been warning about coming to fruition in the United States, everywhere else too, but in the United States, via a man who claims to oppose what he's introducing. There's no better example of someone who has sold out to a colossal extent, indeed totally, than Alex Jones. I was pointing this stuff out a long time ago, and then along came Alex Jones later, but still a long time ago. And he was talking about all these things that Trump is introducing, and he was opposing them. He was warning about them. And now, day after day, he's promoting them. The latest one, which I found absolutely staggering last night, is that he's supporting Trump's desire to use troops to unseat Maduro in Venezuela and to put troops into Mexico against the will of the Mexican government, using the excuse of drug cartels or whatever. But if you put this thing together in a much more expanded way, You can go back to Elon Musk's grandfather, a guy called Haldeman, who was operating in Canada, and he was pushing something called technocracy. The technate, they called it. The technate technocracy is a form of government which they want globally, in which no longer do you have elected politicians. That's why they're putting so many moronic politicians into power, because they're trying to undermine public support for elected politicians. You look at the UK cabinet, there's not a brain cell to rub together, not two brain cells to rub together there in the cabinet of the UK, including the Prime Minister, Starmer. You look at the cabinet and the government of Trump in the United States, same. I'm sure you'll find, you look all over Europe, you'll find the same too. So the idea is that you have a government of appointees, of technocrats, of bureaucrats, of people running health systems, etc., appointed people. And the technate that Elon Musk's grandfather wanted and was supported by people in the United States, and the technocracy movement in the 1930s supported Adolf Hitler, by the way, they were planning a technate area that went from where? You can see the maps, the old maps from the 1930s, that goes from Venezuela in South America all the way through Central America, including Panama and Mexico, up through the United States, up through Canada, and guess where it ends in the north? Greenland. And when you look at targeting Venezuela, moving troops into Mexico, saying we want Canada to be the 51st state, which he never mentioned in the election campaign, and suddenly he comes to office and he's all over it, and why they want to include Greenland as an American territory is it's the technate unfolding. And these technates are designed to have their like all over the world under a world government, which again would be appointed, not elected. So when you've been doing it as long as I have, 36 years now, these things all fit. But if you're new to it, it's bewildering. And I understand why. It was bewildering to me in 1990. You don't see how the things fit. And therefore, I've just finished a new book, which is designed specifically to put these elements together and show how it all fits together. Because I see people, genuine people, who are opposing this, but supporting that. When that and this are both part of the same conspiracy for global dystopia.
I also had some David Icke thinking about something specific that I think, how can they introduce a digital ID or a chip? And here's my hypothesis. There will be so much AI and fake images and fake videos that will be very hard to prove if it's real or not. And the reason how to prove that you didn't do it is if you have a digital footprint or you have a biometric signing, that's not me. So they got to introduce it in a way that you will be forced to take it under the sign of security. Your data can be hacked. It's for your safety. And that's so hard to explain to normal people because they'll think, yeah, we should be protected. We should be safe. We should be protected. And then you try to explain it and then they say, oh, yeah, you're a conspiracy thinker or that's thinking a bit too far. What do you think of this theory that there will be more and more fake images and that you will have to prove that you didn't do something? Because these days, sometimes it seems that you're guilty until proven innocent. And with this digital footprint, you have some proof like, I didn't do it. I wasn't there. This image is not me or this footage is not from me.
I think you're spot on, mate. That's one element of it. There are many others. And look at it now. We keep coming back to Elon Musk. Go and look at his page on Twitter X with all its millions and millions of views for every post. And you'll see him pushing this AI system he calls Grok. And what he's pushing is how you can basically fake anything. And So what is real anymore? You can go on to X and you can see posts, and they seem to be showing a picture of A, B, or C. And it turns out they're AI generated and not what they appear to be. And the more that AI moves on, and it's moving on so fast for reasons that not just invention either, the more you will not be able to tell the difference between, quote, real and not real. And yeah, what you're talking about is a technique that I dubbed back in the 1990s problem reaction solution. You create the problem, you get the reaction from the public, do something about the problem, and then you offer the solution to the problems you have covertly created, but the public demanding an answer to the problem don't know that. And problem reaction solution is used all the time. And there's another version of it I call no problem reaction solution, which is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the illusion of it, i.e., human caused climate change. And from that illusory problem, just a perceptual problem, you can offer solutions that are not necessary that transform society. We're now having, for instance, in Canada, in effect, environmental climate lockdowns, where people are denied from going to great vast areas with big fines if they do, in the very same way that we experienced under COVID. And this whole idea of a climate lockdown policy was predicted a long time ago, that this was part of the plan. Yeah, absolutely. There's a very good chance that will be part of the way that they do it, because they need your perception. And because there are 8 billion people in the world, so we're told, and the number of people in full knowledge who are doing this is tiny by comparison, they have to have your perception so you will behave the way that suits them. So they're not going to tell you that we're doing this because we're creating a global dystopia, which yourself, if you're young enough, and you've got to be quite old not to be included, but certainly your children and grandchildren will absolutely hit the eye of the storm of it, under a system of total control of everything you do, even down to what you think via this AI human fusion.
This is, you hit a crucial point for me, because I'm going to share from the heart what I think about the future. If you want to think about the future, you want to see and take a look at the mindset of young people and children. And I got to be honest with you, like on my channel, very few people under 40, let alone 30. When you had these gatherings, there were very few young people. You have them gathering and talking about Gaza, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious about your perspective. But this mobilization of the hidden agenda, it doesn't seem to hit the young people, according to me. They're addicted to technology. They're busy with other things, short attention span. So I'm a bit pessimistic about the future when I look at the mobilization mindset and consciousness of the young people and the children these days. What's your take on that?
I don't know. You've probably noticed that one of the big targets of this conspiracy is older people. I was born in 1952, and therefore I was born into a very different world to this one. It was still a controlled world, but not even beginning to be on the scale that it is now. And because I was born into that world, I've been able to observe how the world has changed. And they say there's no fool like an old fool, and that's true. Because if you have lived a long life and learned nothing, then that's pretty bloody foolish. But lots of older people have learned something, and they can see the change that's taken place. And now they're being more and more marginalized and more targeted. They were massively targeted by the COVID fake vaccine, for instance, and other means during COVID. The young are born into the world as it is. And I've just seen a study which came out in the last few days where they're looking at the effect of smartphones on the population. And what they found is fundamental changes in young people who are addicted to these phones, which is an enormous number, in terms of their brain activity and the way it processes information, how their personality changes have taken place as a result of this period since smartphones came in. And it's been my contention since way back that there are frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies coming off those phones that are designed to impact on brain function. And what the same study has found is that older people who are not addicted to phones, because lots of them are, but those that are not addicted to phones, even don't have them, they're unchanged in terms of the way their brain processes information. And so when you come into the world, you tend to think that this is how it is. This is normal to you because you know nothing else. And so when you're a young person that's been born into this technological society, which is expanding all the time, getting more extreme, then this is your normal. Whereas to older people, it's not, because they've got a radar to see that it's changed dramatically. So what they want is to target the younger people with all this stuff, everyone really, but specifically the young, because they're going to be the adults when this stuff comes in full blown. And more, the older generations will die off. And with it will go the memory of what it was like before, thus understanding the scale of change and control that's taken place.
I feel that's also, by the way, a bit the same thing with my grandma. She lived through World War II. She could tell those experiences. She experienced totalitarianism, some people fascism, other people communism. But then 2 generations, like those lived stories, die. And then there's another soil to do it again, because those stories are not being passed on of what happened in the past and what life looked like.
There's that old saying, if you don't remember history, then you are destined to repeat it. And so the idea is to put history down the memory hole in terms of people that directly experienced it, so that you can rewrite history and tell a completely different story of what actually happened and how people were affected. But I'll give you a simple story to give you an example of what I'm saying about targeting the young. What's happening to them is from the schools onwards, parents onwards in many cases, but from definitely the school onwards, they are being prepared perceptually to live in this dystopian society and to think it's normal. So there's a school on the Isle of Wight, just off the south coast of England, where my children went to, Kerry and Gareth and Jamie. And when they went to it, everything was open. You walked in the school and that was it. Now, if you go to that same school, it's like a prison camp. There's big high fences all around it. And when you go in, it's like a prison. I don't know if anyone's ever been to in a prison, or you can go to these wildlife parks and go into the lions area, and it's the same, whereby you go in and then there's another gate, a lock gate, which you have to get permission to go through, and so it goes on to get in the school. And so any child that's going to that school, and it's the same all over the country, you'll know what it's like in your country, but those children will have that normalized. It's a normalization of dystopia and control. And if you take on board why that's being done as a child, then that's adding to your fear of everything, your fear of what might happen, your anxiety of what might happen, because the school is basically a protection zone for you. Now, there's no way that things have changed so utterly dramatically in the period of Jamie is what, 30, early 30s, and he went to that school when it was so different.
That's a bit like the overprotective mother. I grew up in the 90s. You know what I liked? Roaming free.
Yeah.
Without my phone, taking risk. I loved that risk. That's how I took responsibility. And yes, sometimes it can go wrong, but not being like helicopter parented, texted all the time, follow up all the time. That was such a liberation to discover myself. And I developed independence. And that is something that is completely missing these days. Also, the addiction to comfort. I really loved that freedom that I had in the 90s. But you're even earlier. My dad and my mom are from the 60s. That was a kind of freedom with maybe less options, but you were a more mature human being, because if you're watched all the time, if you have to ask permission, that is not something that a mature human being has to do. That is something that an infant has to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I came across a document long time ago now, which was apparently found in a copier in 1986. And it was called Silent Weapons for a Quiet War. And this document was a manual on how to mass perceptually control, mind control the population. And it was very detailed. I include it in some of my books. And I've always remembered a line in it. If you treat people like 12-year-olds, they will start acting like them. And that's what we're seeing more and more. When I was a kid in the 50s, my instructions from my mother were to, when I went out the door about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, when it wasn't a school day, was to be back when the street lights came on. And I was away, just ad-libbing life, making my own fun with my mates, etc. And now it's the attention, which was then an expanded attention of possibility, is now that, the scrolling generations. And it's been systematic. It's done on purpose. What is that except a stepping stone to full-blown AI human fusion? That's what it is. They first of all give you something you hold. Then they move to something that's on the body. They want to get in the body, but something that's on the body. So you've got your Apple Watches and all your stuff, paraphernalia people put on their bodies linked to the internet and the Wi-Fi. And then they go in the body. And the biggest point where they went in the body was the COVID fake vaccines. So if you look at, and I'm in touch with a number of different people who are looking at the blood of fake vaccinated people. And I keep saying fake vaccine because it's not a vaccine by previous definitions of a vaccine, the COVID vaccine. And of course, that technique, that way of, quote, vaccination is now being expanded into other vaccines as well. But you look at what they're seeing under an electron microscope in the blood of people. They're self-replicating nano systems. They are under the control of some sort of program, in the sense that they are building systems in the body. And some won't be able to make that transition, and they'll die of various things or have real serious ailments. And then others will get transformed into something else. And that microchipping, see, people like Elon Musk, they're not giving you the cutting edge, but they're selling you the concept. So the real cutting edge can go on unseen. So Neuralink, his brain chip company, wants to put quite a size brain chip in the brain and have wires coming out and connected to something behind the ear. That's the Stone Age. It might seem like cutting edge to many people who get their information from the mainstream media, but it's the Stone Age. And I remember he was doing an interview, Musk, and the interviewer asked a very relevant question. He said, "But Mr. Musk, how many people are going to want a bit of their brain skull or a bit of their skull taken away to put one of your chips in their brain? How many people are going to do that?" And his answer was, "We won't necessarily have to do that because you can go in to the brain through the veins. And all you've got to do is trick the brain to allow, through the blood-brain barrier, this stuff to get in the brain, and it rewires the way the brain processes information." And that's what's been happening with the COVID fake vaccines. That's what COVID was really all about, bottom line. It's about getting this stuff into people. And the Neuralink story is it's a diversion, but it is selling a concept, the concept of human technology fusion.
The last question that I have, it's another topic, but I'm very curious about your theory about it. We've been seeing problems with Muslim immigrants in Western Europe and certain cities, London, Brussels, Paris. What do you see about problems with Muslim immigrants? Because I did some research, and again, AI said it's fake, that Albert Pike was talking about the World War III and that it was going to be against the Muslims. What is your view of everything that's happening with the Muslims, stab attacks, grooming gangs? Is there a link with the underlying agenda? Because what's going on there, according to you?
Well, what they want is a civil war in these various countries, which will allow them to impose their fascist tyranny to stop the war, stop the civil war. And the more extreme stories appear in the newspapers and online about Muslim migrants and what they do, some of them do, the better for the cult, because it makes the population furious and angry and frustrated about what they see as their culture being overridden and taken over. Now, I remember as a kid when I first heard about the British Empire and the other European empires too, and how they went into these countries all over the world and took them over and imposed their version of everything on the population. And I was appalled that anyone could do that. And in reverse now, we're seeing the same thing happening. We're seeing in cities across Europe and the United States, but Europe's a massive example, Britain, of another culture taking over from the indigenous culture, or as indigenous as you want to go back anyway. And the question is why? And you can't get away when you research this from Israel. Not Jewish people in general, although they are some of the most programmed people from cradle to grave you'll ever meet because of the way that they are programmed to believe what their leaders, who don't have their best interests at heart, by the way, want them to believe. But what you are looking at, and if you do any research, you can uncover this. There are elements coming out of Israel, your Mossads and etc., that are behind this massive influx of migrants from the Middle East and elsewhere too into Europe and through the southern border into America for a long time. And so why? You really have to get into the mindset of some of these people. they are utterly insane. And I'm not using that as a metaphor, I'm using it literally. They believe, the most extreme of them, in this ludicrous, and I can show that it's ludicrous, Old Testament story of the emergence of the Jewish people and ancient Israel. And part of that is that they say that there have been two temples in Jerusalem, and the Messiah, it's not Jesus, it's the Jewish Messiah, will return only when certain things happen. They talk about the third temple on Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is now and has been for so long. And if you'd have said not that long ago that the plan is to demolish the mosque and replace it with a third Solomon's, quote, temple, then people will have said, you are mad, mate. It would be a bloodbath. But now look at it. Gaza is destroyed. The people of Gaza, the Palestinians of Gaza, are in a desperate state. The West Bank, the other area of Palestinians, is being basically deleted in terms of Palestinian occupation and replaced by Jewish settlers supported by the United States and Trump. And the IDF is now in control. So suddenly, demolishing the mosque and putting another one, a new Solomon's temple in its place, becomes less crazy as a suggestion than it would have been before. And these people are so crazy and so welded to these ludicrous ancient stories that have no basis in reality, that they believe that before the temple can be built, they have to sacrifice red heifers that have never had a yoke on their back, etc., and never given birth, and loads of other criteria. And they have to sacrifice one of those and mix it with certain things, and then that has to happen before the temple can be returned and the Messiah come. They've imported red heifers from Texas to Israel, and they've just sacrificed one. It had two black hairs on its back, which meant that it wasn't appropriate for the real ceremony, so they had to practice one relatively recently to play that out. And crucially, what they say must happen before the Messiah can come is that Edom must be destroyed. And Edom is the West. It is Europe. It is the United States and Canada, etc. And you listen to these stunningly extremist rabbis who are saying that Edom must be destroyed and that Islam is their means to do it. And then you start looking at people like George Soros of the Open Society Foundations and his son, who have put billions of dollars, billions, tens of billions of dollars into this Open Society Foundation. Open society equals open borders, to fund this surge of movement from the Middle East and other countries into Europe. And if you then look at how it started, it really got underway because of wars instigated by the United States and Britain, Tony Blair, in Iraq, in Libya, through another British Prime Minister, David Cameron, and Barack Obama, and other countries. And they knew that when they create war and devastation, and they've absolutely devastated Libya, they're now having slave markets in the towns. You're not going to go south looking for a new life. You're going to go north into Europe, which is what they did. And as a result of that massive movement of people, initially to get away from the conflict, which had been manufactured, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, yeah, that turned out to be true, didn't it? Other people from other countries have gone on the back of that and have moved in enormous numbers into Europe. Now, more and more are coming across the channel into Britain, which is creating a lot of tension and fury in the UK. And the idea is that the indigenous population, which includes many former migrants and migrant families that were born here, is designed to be in a civil war on the basis of cultural conflict. Because the migrants are not, and I say the migrants, I'm talking about the extreme ones, not rank and file people who just want a better life. But the migrants in that criteria have no interest in assimilating into the population and respecting the indigenous culture. They want to impose their own. And this is the really key thing that has to be addressed and understood. Because boats, dinghies, are coming from France to Britain, and it's systematic. It's been exposed how the dinghies that are being used by people traffickers, when they arrive on the east coast of Britain, they're being put on trucks and taken back to France so they can be used again by the government. And how these pristine life jackets are being worn by the migrants coming over. Why would a people trafficker group be interested in the safety of migrants? As long as they've got their money, it's over. Couldn't care less what happens after that, they'd say. But they have these pristine new life jackets, and they're taken back so they can be used again. And the government, at the same time, is saying, oh, no, we must stop the people traffickers. You are the people traffickers. And what is also happening is the French Navy this has been proved with the leaking of communications between the two. The French Navy is escorting these dinghies into the area of the British Border Police, and the British Border Police are taking over and helping them get into to the east coast of Britain. It's all systematic. And this is the key point, because you can see the people in the dinghies very clearly, that they're not. Overwhelmingly, they are not families, mothers and children fleeing war. They're coming from France. They are military-aged young men. And they're coming into this country, as they're gone into Europe, in fantastic numbers. Now, that's not a coincidence that all these military-age young men are being infused into British society. They're being given enormous benefits from the government that the indigenous population don't get and can't get. And it's all encouraging the flow to get bigger and bigger, and it's leading somewhere. And when you then go to these extreme rabbis in Israel who are saying we're using Islam to destroy Edom, the West, which has to be destroyed before the Messiah can come, then you start to get a kind of idea of how this fits together. And there are rabbis in Israel who have said that Donald Trump will go down eternally for serving the interests of this by destroying America, which is what he's doing. Everything that America claimed to once stand for, he's dismantling, not least with these tariffs, which are not paid by the exporting country, they're paid by the importer in the United States that then has to pass the cost on, or most of it, to the public in higher prices. And you've got Trump saying, oh, all these countries are giving us all this money now with the tariffs. No, they're not giving you a penny, and you know that, you liar. The money you say you're accumulating is coming from the people you said you represented in higher prices. This is why inflation's starting to really wind up in the United States. So the thing is, whenever any of these people in authority tell you something, the thing to do is to go on the premise that they're lying to you. Now, you do a bit of research, and every now and again, and it is only now and again, you'll find that they were telling the truth, or at least partly the truth in this case. But overwhelmingly, you will find they were indeed lying, because that's their job. Because this is a perceptual conspiracy to control perception, to control behavior. And lying is the bottom line foundation essential to that. And therefore, instead of saying they're the authority and they're the government and they wouldn't lie to us, or accept that what they're saying is true, you take as a matter of course the fact that if they say it's happening, it's not. And if they say they'll do it, they won't. And if they say they won't do it, they will. And they're lying to you. And that, I can tell you, saves a lot of grief further down the road when you realize they were indeed lying to you because of the events that unfold. And the thing is that we look at countries, look at Belgium and the Netherlands and Britain and America and Canada and so on. But each of them has a deep state. In other words, a network that runs the country from the shadows. But you go to the next level, and all those deep states answer to the same force. It's a global agenda. And that's why people that say, we've just got to focus on America. And people say to me, why are you always talking about America? Because you're in Britain. Why don't you look after your own country? Simple. Because America is Britain, is Belgium, is the Netherlands, is Germany, once you get to that level above that.
David, Icke, an icon. I'm so thankful that I can finally talk to you. If anybody want to know more about the agenda, problem, reaction, solution, and what they have in store and what to do about it, I would advise any listener and viewer to check out his books. You can also go to iconic.com. That's a streaming platform where you can see interesting documentaries, videos to support the man because he's independent and he keeps on speaking. He's one of the few that I know that still, despite consequences, says what he thinks is true. I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. And if you support my podcast, you can go to hetehangijs.com/steun. You can do a monthly donation or one-time donation, or go to hetehangijs.com/shop and buy some of my merchandise and spread this video, spread my message, spread David Icke's message, and give it a comment, share, so we can reach more people with this important message. I want to thank David for being a guest, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Vind je het leuk wat we doen en wil je het vrije woord ondersteunen? Ga dan naar hetehangijzers.com/steun en word lid of doneer, zodat we onafhankelijk open gesprekken kunnen blijven voeren. Steun of doneer en draag je steentje bij om hete hangijzers te kunnen blijven bespreken.